all civilized people must come together to drive out terrorists and extremists from our societies, stripping them of funding, territory, and ideological support. We must stop radical Islamic terrorism. So let us work together for a peaceful, prosperous, and free Indo-Pacific. And together we will achieve everything we dream for our nations and for our children.
As President Trump continues his trip to Asia, we ask the question, how has America's standing on the world stage been impacted by the Trump presidency? And today, what a treat. As we honor our vets, we bring in this amazing panel of military veterans. I said it at the top, I'll say it again. We cannot thank you folks enough for all that you have done for our great nation. Let's begin with Johnny Joey Jones, Marine Corps bomb technician who lost both of his legs in Afghanistan. You say this is a stark contrast from Obama. Trump is attacking threats head on and not kicking a can down the road. What do you mean by that?
Well, you know, if Teddy was speak softly and carry a big stick, then I guess Obama was speak softly and give your enemy your stick, and now we have speak loudly about how big your stick is. So that's kind of the difference in tactics there. That's the progression we have. So it is a stark contrast. So far, it's proving effective. We're defeating ISIS in a lot of places, but just like any whack-a-mole, they're going to pop up in other places. So I think right now we understand this is truly a threat that is ideological, and it's how we back that up moving forward. So tactically, we may be sound, but strategically, looking long-term, you know, I'm still beating the drum waiting for what is our goal in some of these places in the long run.
Darren Porcher, we talk to you a lot here on the Fox News channel. You're a good friend of the show, Army veteran, former NYPD officer, and you say the president has really reestablished the U.S. as a world power by expanding the military's war on terror. Obviously, in light of the events we just saw here in the Big Apple a few weeks ago and what we see around the world. What do you mean by that?
I think Donald Trump has asserted himself as a true leader for us as Americans, and it's very important that we have someone on the grandiose stage that represents America accordingly. When we look at what's happening in North Korea, we've had failure upon failure with past administrations. And as we look at what Donald Trump is doing right now, some may see it as bellicose, but I think it's a necessary step in moving forwards and reestablishing us, going back to the Reagan era as a superpower.
I want to get to the language. You use the phrase bellicose. Not everybody here on the panel agrees with President Trump's language. I want to go right now to Katie Horgan, U.S. Marine Corps veteran, VP of Operations at Self-Made. And you say the president's style creates, quote-unquote, noise. You agree with the foreign policy, but the communication style does not engender support. What do you mean?
So personally for me, it's very distracting. It's hard for me to actually cut through the noise. The aggressive Twitter diplomacy and some of the comments that he makes to actually get to what he's trying to accomplish. And I think that can just really detract from his message and what he's actually trying to accomplish. I do agree with his priorities. I just don't necessarily agree with how he's going about doing it. I'd like to see him exercise a little bit more soft power, both in rhetoric and also, I mean, another example is the cuts to the State Department. There's many different ways to diplomacy, and I think sometimes, you know, walking softly and carrying a big stick is a good way to get what you want instead of just being aggressive.
Okay, I want to, while we have the mic in close proximity to Sean Parnell, I want to go to him, retired U.S. Army Ranger. He says he really likes the foreign policy, and you like the fact that we have a president that speaks with what you call moral clarity. Explain that.
I think it's refreshing that the president speaks with such moral clarity on a number of issues. I mean, and really, it puts our enemies on notice that the United States of America is back, and it makes our allies feel good, to be honest with you. You know, and I think President Trump, in the 9 months of his presidency, he's decimated ISIS. Mosul's been liberated. He's decertified the disastrous Iranian nuclear deal. And he's brought countries like Saudi Arabia and China to the diplomatic table where we haven't seen anything like that in decades. So I don't think the president gets the credit that he deserves for the foreign policy accomplishments that he's made in just a short time.
And one of the areas where the president gets credit from a lot of the base, I know I talk to these people out in the middle of the country all the time, is really that prioritization of America first. I want to get to you, sir. Jason Beardsley, former U.S. Army Special Operations, former Green Beret, awarded 2 Bronze Stars. You say you love the fact that he has prioritized American citizens and emphasized security, that he won't acquiesce, that he will take action.
Yeah, absolutely. Sean said it, but we've got a president now that's leading from the front. He's established that Western values are great. great. You know, he did it in Poland. He did it again in Saudi Arabia. We're bringing our allies on, welcoming people into NATO, and then pushing back on places like North Korea, belligerent states, bellicose states. And I'll agree with Sean again there. That bellicose language sometimes is that moral clarity that cuts through the white noise that we hear elsewhere. We've got an economy that's on the rise. We've got employment, I think it's the lowest in 17 years. So there's a lot of things that are happening underneath all that noise, and we're excited to see that leadership.
See all these Army guys, we have each other back.
Right.
Even on this panel, we have each other.
Well, but I'm going to.
I see you.
But with that, I'm going to go to another Army guy, Caleb Campbell, retired U.S. Army lieutenant, former NFL linebacker there with the Lions and a few other teams. You say you like the job with diplomacy, but we're a mess at home, and to you it seems the policy and the reaction is really reactionary, not strategic. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I think everything is kind of reactionary based on what's happening, and I understand. Like I applaud the president for having our interest in protecting America first, and I'm so thankful that, especially being an American. But it just seems like everything is reactionary, especially with the blanket statements. And for me, I think there's a 24-hour rule, and I know this doesn't necessarily apply to when it comes to American terrorism or threats, according to our nation. But 24-hour rule, like how I respond whenever something happens 24 hours later, I usually don't respond in the same manner. So I don't really have necessarily, an approval when it comes to these blanket statements that seem more reactionary than strategic.
The Army-Navy battle is going to be in a few weeks. We're going to stage it now. Carl Higbee, he's the Navy guy. Let's go to Carl right now, former Navy SEAL, Chief of External Affairs for AmeriCorps. You say he's doing an amazing job focusing on ISIS on the run, high troop morale, and world starting to respect us again.
Absolutely. And the biggest thing that I can say about what President Trump has done is he's instilled faith in the veterans, that when they come home, they'll be taken care of. AmeriCorps and especially the Department of Labor has rolled out a number of programs prior to Veterans Day that veterans, even they understand that they are possibly going into conflict on behalf of this nation and at the president's behest. And when they come back, they know now that they're going to be taken care of to much further extent than they ever were before. And I think that's a very powerful thing for morale and their ability to fight this war.
Finally, but certainly not least, our buddy Kathy Barnett served 10 years in the Armed Forces Reserve. What say you?
What say I? I say what we just heard 2 days ago, just this week, where the Korean National Assembly introduced President Trump as the leader of the world, not the leader of the free world, not the leader of just America, but the leader of the world. And only Democrats and despot regimes are the ones who take issue with the foreign policies of this president. It's an enormous pivot from the apology tours we endured for the past 8 years. Right. I've read the 70-point immigration plan. I agree jot and tittle of it. The Paris Agreement simply redistributed America's wealth to the rest of the world. So we finally have a leader, and I believe the international community is taking a collective sigh of relief of a leader who says what he means and means what he says, and I agree with that.
Along those lines, you mentioned the past 8 years. Quick show of hands. Who feels better now with regard to military issues than they did over the course of the last 8 years?
I'm going to put two hands.
Sean Parnell, the Army guy, is cheating, putting 2 hands up.